After Dr. Baden concluded his testimony, the defense rested. The state did not provide any rebuttal evidence, so the case for Christopher Gregor has concluded. This video will provide some of Dr. Baden's testimony as well as closing arguments. Hello, my name is Deborah Lelli and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on all upcoming videos. Let's get started. The purpose of Dr. Baden's testimony was to show that Corey died of natural causes and not because of homicide. Dr. Michael Baden will provide his opinion as to Corey's death. He will review the documentation that he reviewed and how he came up with his conclusion. Dr. Michael Baden also talks about the lung inflammation. He goes over some of the CPR treatment. Here, Dr. Baden will provide his opinion as to Corey's cause of death.
Although you did not perform the autopsy, were you able to develop an opinion as to the cause and manner of death?
Yes.
Do you know who did perform the autopsy in this case?
Dr. Ragasa.
Okay. Did you review the autopsy report prepared by Dr. Ragasa?
Absolutely, yes.
And do you know when that was prepared?
Yes, that autopsy was done 14 hours after the death of Corey.
Okay. Did you also review medical records from IV Pediatrics?
Yes.
Did you review medical records from Community Medical Health Hospital?
I did.
Did you review medical records from Jersey Shore Medical Center?
Yes.
Did you review medical records from Southern State Medical Center?
Yes.
Did you review what's called histological slides?
Yes.
And what are those?
Those are glass slides that most people come in contact with.
Opinion is as to Corey's cause of death.
I think that Corey's cause of death has been confused because of extensive injuries caused by the CPR process. That I agree with a part of Dr. Ragasa's cause of death that indicates injuries to the heart and other organs, which I think is are typical vigorous CPR injuries. And I don't agree with that part, but I do agree with the inflammation and sepsis part of his diagnosis. The inflammation and sepsis part of Dr. Ragasa's diagnosis refers to inflammation in the lung and the finding on culture of bacteria in the lung that could cause pneumonia and sepsis. So I think my cause of death is different than Dr. Ragasa's in recognizing, in my opinion, that the injuries are all CPR injuries. Nobody can live for more than 2 minutes with a 1.5 inch laceration of the heart, for example. And I do agree that the most likely cause of death is the lung inflammation, the bacterial capture of what the bacteria was, and his symptoms, the symptoms of shortness of breath. Cyanosis means a bluish color due to low oxygen. Finding in the hospital that he had an 85% oxygen level, which is very low. All of us here would have about 97% or higher. The high white count, 29,000, mostly polymorphonuclear cells, which are the cells that respond to a bacterial infection. And then what I also based my opinion on is the CAT scan finding of pneumonia also present. So I think all together, the most likely cause of death was a very severe, rapid pneumonia. The manner of death, for all the information that we have, is natural.
And the defense attorney goes on, they begin talking about CPR and about the injuries and whether the CPR that was conducted could have caused some of those injuries.
Well, yeah, there's a difference in how you do the CPR to persons as they get older. The older we get, the more brittle our bones become and the more breakable they are. And the child like Corey, the ribs are all bendable. They're like cartilage in our ears, and so they're very easy to push down. But the bottom line has to be, it's got to be pushed down about 2 inches down to squeeze the heart against the spine so that the blood is pumped out of the heart. And if that isn't done, then the heart, and that's done usually until a normal sinus rhythm occurs. And that often happens, especially in people in hospitals, that the CPR be done, and usually within 5, 10, 15 minutes, you get a normal pulse back, and then you can stop the CPR because now the heart is going back to pumping blood normally. But if the heart doesn't pump blood normally, it's kept up, and in this situation, it was kept up much longer than usual.
So you said much longer than usual. What would be normal? What would be usual CPR on a 6-year-old child?
Well, normally, if the heart doesn't respond by developing its own normal sinus rhythm, the CPR will stop. That is, it's fruitless usually after 20 minutes.
And how long was CPR conducted for?
49 minutes.
And that's unusual. Now, can people die from CPR?
Well, not usually, because they're already dead. When the CPR can only be started after the heart stops. So once the heart stops, the person is dead. And then the alternative is, can we revive the heart to start beating again? And CPR sometimes starts the heart again after 5 or 10 minutes. But if it doesn't restart the heart, it becomes of no value afterwards. But it isn't that the CPR caused the death. It's just the fact that the heart does not restart beating that means the person is dead.
Dr. Baden also talks about the high blood white count and why that suggests that there was a sudden infection.
Now, in addition to all of those things, in the medical records that you reviewed, did you see any other signs that Corey had pneumonia?
Well, the admission signs of shortness of breath, cyanosis, discoloration of the skin, measurement of an 85% oxygen, which is very low, a rapid heart rate. He had a heart rate of 144, which is higher than normal. And of course the very high white blood count that I think by itself indicates some type of infection.
So let's start with the high white blood count. The blood count, I believe, was 29,000. Am I right?
Right.
Okay. What's normal white blood count for a 6-year-old?
Well, about 7,000, 8,000 that most of us have here. It's just the normal white blood count that keeps track of everything going on in our body.
So he was triple.
Yes,
Okay.
more than triple.
So with an increase in, I'm going to try to get this word right, polymorphonuclear cells, right?
Yes,
And we discussed those earlier, right?
yes.
Okay. Now, I know we discussed it, but why do you think that we saw, what's your opinion as to why we saw an increase in the I'll call them polys, in the polys?
Because of a sudden infection present in his body that the white blood count previously at one of the hospitals was normal, and it suddenly shot up to 29,000, which would indicate a beginning infection.
Could it also indicate a injury?
Injury usually doesn't cause that kind of increase in white cells unless it gets infected, then it'll go up.
So if he was, so let's go back to the blunt force trauma that you opined was due, with the blunt force trauma was the CPR that damaged the heart, right? You've already testified, I believe, that's not what killed him, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Could that have been why we see the response in the polys?
Well, he had that response before CPR. When he had a 29,000 white count, his heart was pumping blood. He was alive. And then when he passed away, the white count would not change. It just stayed the same afterwards. It wouldn't increase any more than that.
So to you, your opinion is that's more reflective of an infection than it is to an actual injury.
That's correct.
The last part I'm going to show from Dr. Baden is when he talks about the bruising and about pneumonia. I'm not going to play the redirect from the state. A lot of the questions that the state asked were questions that weren't relevant. Really, there were questions about things that Dr. Baden had not reviewed, and they were questions that really wouldn't make a difference in his findings. So I'm not going to play any of that, but I'm just going to finish up with his testimony here.
Now, we started this with going from Ivy to Community Health to Jersey Shore, and now at Southern Ocean, you're saying he has pneumonia. Is it possible to develop that type of pneumonia within 12 hours?
It is. Staph aureus pneumonia can happen very quickly. Usually not, but it can happen quickly. And my opinion is based on the fact that there's something infection going on in Corey's body, and with all the findings, it's most likely, it's more likely than other kinds of infections being infection of the lung. It could be something other. There are other natural deaths that can occur in which the cause of death is not identified.
Would a pediatrician at Ivy Pediatrics who was doing a child abuse surgery assessment, child abuse assessment, be looking for infection?
Well, to some degree,
Judge,
he
we're going to
should.
object to the phrase of that question. That was not the testimony that she was doing. It was that he was taken to the pediatrician for an examination. So that's, thank you.
So when he was taken to the pediatrician for an examination, were they looking for infection?
They would be looking for anything that was abnormal, but they were focusing on bruises on the skin.
So once the testimony from Dr. Baden concluded, there was a hearing done to see whether the judge would provide any special instructions because Dr. Ragaza was missing. The judge decided that he would not be providing that. So during closing remarks, the defense does obviously comment on Dr. Regata missing. He also makes comments on Nurse Lindsay. He makes comments on her being part of the Justice for Corey group. He talks a lot about her and her comments about Christopher not being emotional enough. And he points out in different parts of surveillance video where he believes that Christopher is showing emotion. So here are some clips from the defense's closing arguments.
On April 2nd, 2021, the world lost a shining light in Corey Mitchell, a 6, almost 7-year-old boy who died. That is tragic. No child, no matter what age, should die. But he didn't do it. He did not kill Corey. And they did not bring in one police witness, one doctor, one expert, one single layperson that showed you any evidence that Christopher caused an injury to Corey that killed him. Oh, they brought in cell phone records. They brought in text messages. They brought in phone calls. They brought in internet searches. They even brought in police from Alcoa, Tennessee. Ms. Lento yesterday sat here and cross-examined Dr. Baden. Her cross-examination consisted of, did you review this text message? Did you review this phone call? Did you review this record? Did you review this record? Her cross had very little to do with medicine. She touched on it, but most of it had to do with, did you know that he had a school teacher that reported seeing a bruise? And the doctor agreed with her. As a matter of fact, at one point, Dr. Baden said to her, I'm agreeing with you too much. But he also testified that none of that stuff had absolutely anything to do with Corey's death. Nothing to do with Corey's death. The one person that might have been able to come here and explain to you Corey's death would be perhaps Dr. Regata. Dr. Regata was the medical examiner. Dr. Regata is the one that dissected Corey. Dr. Regata is the one that prepared the slides. Dr. Regata is the one that took each and every organ out of that body. Dr. Regata is the person that ordered the exams he thought were appropriate, such as a lung culture, not a blood culture. We heard Dr. Regata's name mentioned more in this case than we heard Christopher's name mentioned in this case. He was the one that did the autopsy. So you don't get to pick and choose little snippets of what you want you to say. You deserve the whole story. What else did they give us? They gave us a doctor, Dr. Deacon, sat here in his chair. 10 minutes before you walked in here, we did a hearing with Dr. Deacon. She testified one way. We brought you into the courtroom. She testified another way. They gave you a nurse, Lindsay Carnivale. Okay, I'm going to get to Lindsay. Lindsay Carnivale. She's a member of Justice for Corey. She's the one that said that Christopher was under emoting. By the way, that's a word I never, ever heard of in my life till I stepped in this courtroom. Under emoting means that he wasn't emotional enough to her liking. Member of Justice for Corey. We all want justice for Corey. We all want justice for everybody. Justice is not convicting a man for murder who did not commit a murder. Scratch on his belly button because it was still moist. Well, who had him? Brianna had him. So how did the injury to the belly button occur? And by the way, I'm not saying that Brianna abused his child, but I'm just trying to show you that he's a 6-year-old child. And he had a fresh abrasion on his belly button while in her custody. What does she do next? Dr. Deacon tells her, I want him to stay. I want to do further studies just to make sure he's got no underlying injury under his skin. So we'll take him by ambulance or whatever, I guess to Jersey Shore. I forget what hospital. Like I said, it's your memory. That's right, not mine. I believe it was to Jersey Shore. And she said, no, I'll take him myself, which is fine. She wanted to take him. She thought it'd be quicker. It's her son. So she takes him to community health. They do an exam there. And what happens at the end of that exam? They want her to take him to Jersey Shore. She takes him. Who's conveying a history? Brianna. She needed to be in control of every one of those medical visits. If she controls the medical visit, she controls the narrative. And we get to meet Dr. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. Remember him? I think Ms. Ferrante did the cross-examination of him. I believe he did the wrong calculation for blood pressure. His blood pressure was actually high. He didn't know that he had done the wrong calculation until Ms. Ferrante, a lawyer, pointed out to a pediatrician doctor that he had done the wrong calculation on calculating his blood pressure. But Dr. said something else. He was a very scary little boy. That's what he said. Very scary little boy. What 6-year-old child that has now been to 3 different medical facilities, it's now close to midnight, he's going from hospital to hospital to hospital, he's being pressed, he's being prodded. What 6-year-old kid is not going to be, was going through Corey's head? Can't even discern a particular injury afforded to that treadmill activity, let alone murder. Murder. Lindsay Carnivale, she just cracks me up. I'll get to her. But why do we have patient waiting rooms if that's not where the parents are supposed to sit or families are supposed to sit? We have them so you sit so they could do their job. So you're not in their way. Do you want to see your loved one intubated? Do you want to see your loved one having CPR performed on them? At 6? So they took him out of the room and they put him in a family waiting room. That's odd. According to Lindsay Carnevale, that's odd. Corey dies. Did anybody officially go, all right, time of death? No. They bring him in to say goodbye. He can't. Look at him. That's what they call under emoting. They had to get him a chair. He's inconsolable. They took him out of the room and they put him in a family waiting room. That's odd. According to Lindsay Carnevale, that's odd. Corey dies. Did anybody officially go, all right, time of death? No. They bring him in to say goodbye. He can't even get in the room. Look at him. Look at him. That's what they call under emoting. They had to get him a chair. He's inconsolable. That's not a man, oh my God, I killed my child. That's a man, oh my God, my child is dead. Lindsay Carnevale, he lacked emotion. He under-emoted. He was clinical when he gave a history. Because he was calm. When he gave a history, he was calm. When he explained to the doctors what was going on, he was able to put himself together and say, Doctor, this is what's happening to my child right now. Please help him. Did she want him to be one of these parents? Oh my God, help him, help him. No, he was calm. She got upset. He was calm when he gave his history. Was that calm? Was that under-emoting? Was that emotional? His oxygen level was 85%. Dr. Baden. It's very low. Should be about 97. Sign of infection. Sign of a breathing issue. Lindsay Carnivale. We might have put the pulse ox on his finger wrong. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? You're giving him CPR, you intubate him, and you're telling us, the jury, and the people here, well, the oxygen level was low because we put the pulse ox on wrong. Come on. The argument is that he beat that child to death by blunt force trauma, that the trauma he incurred on that child left no bruising, but we could see it underneath in the skin that there was bruising. So we had, I guess, invisible bruising. That's the blunt force trauma, with such force that he lacerated his heart and his liver, although even Dr. Andrew agrees that the liver had nothing to do with the cause of death. So let's think about that for a second. We see a red mark on Corey's chest. Every doctor testified to this circular red mark on his chest that occurred when he was in the hospital. They all agreed that that is not a bruise. That was from a medical device or a pad. So you're telling me that a pad that they put on this boy when he got into the hospital left a bruise, but the blunt force injury he caused, we can't see. It's not there. It's not there. It's inside. It's inside. It wasn't the chest injury. The chest injury happened 12 days prior. Every doctor testified to it. Deacon noted it. Hogg noted it. Andrews said it had nothing to do with his death. So, where is the injury that he did that caused Corey's death? There is none. None. Corey died from an infection, a rapidly growing, spreading infection, whether it be pneumonia, which he thinks is over 50% chance, is what he told Ms. Lento. He did not die from a homicide. He died from natural causes.
So that was the closing arguments made by the defense attorney. Here's some of the clips made by the prosecutor. She starts her arguments talking about the defense attorney's closing remarks. Talks about when the police go to Christopher's house and all the things that he forgets to tell the officers. She makes it a point to talk about nothing being wrong with Corey when Brianna dropped him off.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Corey Travis Mitchell loved the solar system, and this case is about Corey. This case is about punishment. On March 20th of 2021, Corey's mother brought Corey home 2 hours late. Corey was punished. He was put on a treadmill. We have a video of this treadmill. On April 2nd of 2021, Corey was brought home 14 hours late. Corey was punished. The person who loved him the most inflicted blunt force trauma, which is child abuse. His heart was lacerated. His liver was lacerated. This case is about punishment. I first want to go over some of the arguments that the defense made, specifically the defense attorney, in his closing argument. The defense attorney argues that Corey died of natural causes. And he's arguing that Brianna's conduct is a ruse to get custody. This argument makes no sense, ladies and gentlemen, right? This was not a ruse that somehow Brianna is making up bruising and taking Corey to the doctor regarding bruising. There's a video that you have seen where you could see the defendant abusing Corey. The defense attorney talks a lot about endangering. Well, you as the jurors get to decide whether what's seen on that video constitutes endangering. And I'm going to talk about this more later, but in terms of the endangering statute and what the state has to prove, the state is not required to even prove physical injury regarding the endangering charge. However, there is evidence of injury to Corey's head, and you hear that from Dr. Andrew when he talks about the contusions that are found underneath the scalp. Defense attorney speaks about substance abuse. Corey did not die because he ingested drugs. There's no evidence of that. So what is the purpose then regarding talking about this? The purpose is to lead you on a path away from the facts of the case and the evidence which is in this case. And the text messages in which the defense counsel is referring to, at the end of it, Brianna talks about the defendant and what's going on with him. This is what is stressing her out. The GoFundMe, right? There's testimony about this. This went for funeral and burial costs for donations. This 33-second video. In the video, you can hear Brianna sighing in response because she thinks that the defendant is not at home because when she gets there, his car isn't there. Brianna lives in Englishtown, not Jamesburg. When Corey gets off the treadmill, he staggers. And Dr. Deacon had more things available to her than Brianna's words. And again, this goes back to the ruse, right? How could this be a ruse? What happened on the treadmill happened before this. Corey was a patient before with this doctor, and there was also testimony that she had spoken with DCP&P. Kim Peace's letter was from the beginning of the school year. The Key West vacation, which is referred to, there was nothing stopping the defendant from going to Key West. And again, we're going to talk about what is required for murder, and there is no premeditation required. So what does that make a difference? The garbage, right? State's not arguing that you need and want to know is captured on this video. The judge at the end of the case is going to talk to you about the law and is going to charge you about the elements, right? The judge is going to tell you that you can use this video as a specific kind of evidence, right? You can use this video to show or to consider what the defendant's motive was, what his intent was, that what happened on April 2nd wasn't an accident or mistake, right? So that's how these two things correlate. The state is not saying that Corey died as a result of the treadmill. What we're saying is what happened in the treadmill shows the defendant's motive and his intent to what he did on April 2nd. And the judge is going to instruct you as to that type of evidence. The treadmill, right? March 20th, 2021. We know that on that particular day that the defendant is angry. He is angry at Brianna and he is angry at the situation. How do we know this? Because he says so. We have the text messages. We know that his purpose and his intent that day was to punish Corey. You can see the text messages, right, of what he specifically says. And if you look at the time, that is right. Well, how to turn on the treadmill by himself. What does that say? Brianna, Corey's mother, and she sees that he has a large bruise on his chest, and it looked like fingerprint bruises all over his arms and legs. And then she talks about something else on the side of his hip. And when she brings back Corey from visitation, she goes to the Barnegat Township Police Department, right? And we had that testimony of the 2 police officers who came. Then the police do a welfare check at the defendant's apartment. The police see the bruises, and the police talk to Corey, but they don't separate Corey from his father. They call DCP&P. Interesting, though, is while the police are at the house, the defendant doesn't say anything to them about Corey being quarantined or Corey being exposed to COVID. After the police are at his house, the defendant sends this class dojo message to the teacher, Kim Peace. And what he says is, Corey's other side of the family had left the state and saw him this weekend after being at a mass gathering. March 30th, Corey is now attending school virtually. Kim Peace says there's still bruising. She speaks to another DCP&P worker, and she says, I don't feel good about what I was seeing and what I was hearing. She's with Corey all the time. Brianna contacts Corey's pediatrician for an emergency appointment to address her concerns on bruising. And she does this on March 30th because all of this is unraveling. And she also speaks to DCP&P about this appointment she's making because she is concerned. March 31st, Corey again attends school virtually. Kim Peace sees the bruising. Brianna files an emergent application for custody because, as she says, she is now in fear of Corey's life. Brianna acts on her concerns, Corey's mother, on Thursday, April 1st of 2021. Brianna picks Corey up about 4:30 and takes him to Dr. Deacon, who is Corey's pediatrician. She then takes Corey to Community Medical Center, and then she then takes Corey to Jersey Shore University Medical Center. Dr. Deacon's testimony corroborates evidence that Corey was murdered, okay? Corey is examined 24 hours before he dies. Dr. Deacon sees 14 areas of bruising and lesions. Corey has no fever. Corey is breathing fine. Corey has no symptoms of pneumonia. Dr. Deacon calls DCP&P. Dr. Deacon calls the emergency room at Community Medical Center so Corey can have blood work. Dr. Deacon did not think it was safe for Corey to go home. That's why she's calling the hospital. Corey tells Dr. Deacon that the injuries are from football and from falling off a treadmill, right? And again, ladies and gentlemen, maybe some of the bruising was sustained of a kid just playing. But we will say that if they are sustained when the defendant is playing football with him, still under his care. Defendant cancels this CPC evaluation because he does not want a specialist to evaluate Corey. Afraid to answer Dr. Unk's questions. He is described as scared. He does a head-to-toe examination. His chest exam is normal. He is not in respiratory distress. He is not wheezing. There's no murmurs. There's no hypoxia. There is absolutely nothing wrong with Corey. His lungs were clear. The doctor maps all of these bruises, and he describes bruises and abrasions and bleeding under the skin. Andrew also talks about Corey's scalp. And he says that when looked at the skin underneath the skin, there was a contusion on the top of his head and a couple of contusions on the backside of the scalp that you couldn't see on the surface. And this is what I was referring to before regarding the bite on Corey's head. The injuries in Corey's condition provide the timeline from when the defendant inflicted blunt force trauma injury on his son. Dr. Andrew is able to determine that these blunt force trauma injuries were inflicted on Corey between 9 a.m. and 1. Also talks about CPR on the right side of the chest. CPR is done on the front of the chest. And like I said, the anterior liver injuries are not uncommonly seen with CPR, but not an injury on the side of the liver that goes deep into the tissue. So that's what he's talking about. This lateral injury, which is a deep tissue liver injury, it just simply can't be caused by CPR unless you're doing liver CPR to bring back breathing. In the context of discussing the CPR injury, the doctor tells us that he has never seen a heart or internal laceration of the heart like this in regard to CPR related injuries, right? So again, it is the fact that this laceration is found deep inside of the heart. And he talks about this inflammation process as well. So the location of the heart and liver injuries are more indicative of the defendant striking Corey more than once, right? And this is something that you have to use your common sense about.
So that was some of the clips from the defense and the state's closing arguments. Stay with us as we watch and we wait until the jury is done deliberating and a verdict or no verdict is brought. But regardless of what the outcome is, stay with us and we will keep you updated when we know what the result of this case is. As always, thank you for watching and until next time.